I'm Ira Jeremiah Wilson. I was born December the 22nd, 1919, out at then at DeKalb, Missouri. It was near the Norman Creek. It was a little town. It was a mining town. And my parents was Ed and May Wilson. Ed Wilson, his parents was Sam and Caroline Wilson. And they lived south of St. James on near this little creek and near this town. And my mother's parents was Sherman and Mattie Green, and they lived south of Rolla on Dry Fork Creek up there. On December 22nd, 1919, it was real cold that night and a lot of snow. And my mother, of course, was pregnant with me. And my dad had to get on a horse to go get a doctor and ride about 4 or 5 miles to get him to bring him back. He was, his name was Dr. Dillon, and he lived on, well, what is now 68. And after he got back, I was born. It was in a log house near Norman, Missouri, on Norman Creek. And then we moved across the creek. We lived there for a few years. Then we moved across the creek near the Spring Hill School, where I would go to school. And I started to school my first grade. And during the hay season that year, I was helping them put up hay. And back then, we put up loose hay with an old hay fork that and has pulleys on it and ropes. And one end you had your wagon with the hay on it. Then you stuck your fork down into it, and it'd get a load of hay, take it up, and pull it down to the back of the barn. And there was a horse that pulled this up from the other end. And my brother was riding a horse, and I had my hands on the rope that was coming down to a pulley, and I was pulling like this. And when the hay hit the track up above in the barn, it loosened the rope, and my hand went down in the pulley. And I was crying, and my brother was riding a horse way out in front, and he couldn't hear me. So this rope in my hand in the pulley just kept going through, and it burnt the meat off of all 4 fingers off of my hand. And finally, the horse got to the end, and he stopped, and they found out that my hand was stuck in this pulley. And I've still got a crippled hand from it. After that, we moved to a little place named, well, it's not a little place, a little bit down the creek, to the Dean School District. And I went to school there for a few years. Then after we moved there and I got out of there, I think I was going into the 4th grade when we moved to Hartford, Illinois. And I started school there in the 4th grade. And we lived in Hartford. My mother got a job. This was back in the Depression days. And we moved there in either 1929 or 1930. And that was getting right into the Depression. My mother found a job at a shoe tannery there where they made tanned hides and everything. She got there. And my brother, who was 18, he was 5 years older than me. And he got a job there too by lying at his age. He said he was 18, but he was only really 17. And but I started school there in Hartford at the WWll Wilson School, which was something. So I went there until I was in the 6th grade, and we moved back to St. James then. And I hadn't finished 6th grade down there. But when I got to St. James, the principal down there wrote on my report card that I was ready to go into the 7th grade. And that's what I did when I came to St. James. I never did finish the 6th grade. I just went into the 7th grade. And I went into a class where my present wife was, and that's when I first started to know her. So this was in the old schoolhouse in St. James. And I went to the 7th and 8th grade there. Our teacher was, in the 8th grade, was Cahill, Leslie Cahill. And then we moved to, or I moved to my freshman year at the high school. Then we only had about 5 or 6 teachers in the high school, and they taught everything. And this coach, the old coach, he liked me pretty well, and he started me playing basketball when I was my first year freshman. When we moved back to St. James, my mother opened a restaurant, my mother and dad, and we lived, there was a little building right by where Tom's Shoes is now. And there was a little building there, and right by it was a theater. Well, back in those days, in order to go to the theater, you had to pay 10 or 15 cents. But I ushered in the theater to pay my way in, and I also cleaned the theater. I swept it out and everything like that. Then all during high school, I worked at the drugstore, before school and after school. And I'd get in there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'd work till school time. Then I'd come back after school and work until closing time, which then was about 10 o'clock. Now they close earlier than that. In 1940, I graduated from the St. James schools, and it wasn't the John F. Hodge. The John F. Hodge after we graduated. Then that year, 1940, then I found a job, or my brother lived in East Alton, Illinois. So I moved down there with him, and I found a job on a grocery truck. We would go from East Alton to the St. Louis grocery, or to St. Louis, to the produce row, and pick up all the produce, put it in the truck, and take it back. I would start out about 4 o'clock in the morning and drive to St. Louis, and by myself too, at that age. And after I'd get the groceries, I'd take it back to East Alton, and we'd take it around and unload it. Then I found a job at a grocery store up on High Street there in Alton, Illinois. And I worked there for, well, until Labor Day of 1940, which I came back, I started back to St. James. Me and another friend of mine from Alton down there started back to St. James. When we got to the Lambert Airfield, if you remember, you'd go underneath a railroad bridge, and there was a curve. Well, right in the middle of that curve, me and another car collided head on. And the fellow that was with me, it broke his neck and killed him. And it sent, put the motor back against the front seat and sent a gift shear through my stomach. Not to the stomach, but it missed my stomach by 1/4 of an inch. And then it cut my back, and I ended up in St. Louis City Hospital down there. And the only identification I had on me was my Social Security card when I worked at Strobach Drugstore. And it had Mr. Strobach's name on it. So they called out here to find out who I was or what my folks were and anything. So they got a hold of him, and he got a hold of my folks. And my old coach, he heard about it too. And so he brought Margaret and my folks, and I don't think my dad come. Just my mother, and down to get me and see about me in hospital. But I came out with them. I was all right when they got down there. I knew them and everything. Then they brought me out and took me to my folks' place out in the country, out north of town. And I was in bed there for quite a while. After that, for a little while, after I got well, I went to work for a Strobox again, just a little while. Then I got a work job at Rystick's Dress Factory, and they had material that made dresses there. And so what I did, I spread this material out on these big long tables, and then you had to get it certain, then the cutters to come along and cut out the dress material. After that, in 1942, in March in 42, I was drafted, went into the Army. We were married in Abilene, Texas in 1942 in September the 19th, I believe it is, Gene. Good thing I remember that. And Margaret stayed down there with me. We rented a house. At that time in the Army, I was only making $21 a month. And so it wasn't very much money, but everybody that went into the Army that was drafted, that's what they made, was $21 a month. So we were married in September, and we found this little house that we could rent, and the old lady lived in part of the house, and we had the rest of it. Well, we rented out one room to some other people, and we lived there until, well, we didn't come home that Christmas. We had Christmas down there. I didn't get a vacation or anything. So I got a picture of us when we had our little Christmas tree and everything with another couple from Arkansas that we knew real well. In April, we went to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. That we was ready to get onto the ship to go over to England. So we got out on this ship. We loaded onto the ship, the whole division. And when we got out one night at midnight, first night, something went wrong with our ship's motors. And so we had to put back into New York port. And they set us there for 1 week. They wouldn't let anybody get off of the boat or anything, just sitting there around on the boat and just watching the big skyscrapers. But then after a week, they got the motors fixed, and we picked up another convoy, and then we went to England. Then we landed in England on Easter Sunday. Well, we landed in England and got off the boat, and they took us into England someplace. I forget the name of the little town we was near, but we was in tents there, and we trained there for different things, but nothing like we was going to hit. So they packed everything of our division up, and all of our clothes and everything went into what we had, went into duffel bags, and our full field packs and everything, and we loaded onto the boat on June the 5th, on the night of June the 5th. And of course, June the 6th was D-Day. It was cleared. We relieved the 82nd Airborne there, and it was fairly clear when we first went in. There was bodies, of course, every place, and sunken boats and vehicles, and we walked up this one road. There was water on both sides, and you could see people laying in the water. So we went and relieved 82nd Airborne there, and this one soldier, we came to a bridge that we was going across, and he says, "I thought you guys would never get here." But anyway, we stayed there, and we took, finally, we got into battle the third day. And they was taking this little town of Portland Abbey. And so we got into there, and it was a neat little town with a rock wall all the way around it. And then after that, we started up the Hill 122, what they call. And Hill 122 was a rough place. That was when we first hit our first casualties, when we was there. But after about a week, we took Hill 122. When we got up to the top of Hill 122, we could look back to the sea back there where the boats were and where they was unloading stuff and everything, and people were still coming in. We was just not very far in at all. So we took that, and then we went on and got into the hedgerows in. And on, I believe it was the second day that we was in combat, there was a call out that there was a colonel that was hurt ahead of the infantry. The infantry was back of him, and I don't know why he was up there, but they said he was hurt laying in a ditch at a crossroads. So me and three other fellows, we took a litter. went up there and crossed. We couldn't get into the ditches, get down low. We had to stay up on the road because the ditches were all mined. There was mine in them. So we got to this crossroads, and before we got there, there was gunfire coming down where the crossroads was. But we had to cross that to get to him. But when we went across, there wasn't a bit of gunfire at all. But we come on to an enlisted man first that was wounded. So we had to take him back, and this was, probably a quarter to a half mile. We had to take him back to a Jeep so they could send him back to the back end and to be taken care of. And so then after that, well, when we was unloading him, the artillery started coming in, and we was in a forest, and it was busting in the treetops right above, coming down. So we got in the hole and stayed there for a little while, and then we decided we'd better get back and go up and get this colonel. And so we made it back up there, got him, brought him back and got him, and I don't know where he's still living or not, but I imagine he's dead by now, but they treated him and he was all right. And we was awarded the Bronze Star for that, for going and getting him when we did. But there's one thing, it's always been on my mind. There was another man, I don't know who he was on a little knoll up there. And I looked up and saw part of his face wasn't there, or it was just all bloody. And I should have went back and got him too, but I didn't. But after that, we started moving through the hedgerows, and we was meeting resistance all along. I mean, our infantry was, which we was a good outfit, and we had more, our division had more days in combat than any other division over in Europe. And but then we went through, we was in Dillingen, Germany, and when the Battle of the Bulge came on. And so instead of, it was across the river, Saar River, that where we were. And they wanted more people, more divisions up to the Battle of the Bulge. So Eisenhower called General Patton and asked if the 9th Division could be up to the Battle of the Bulge in Luxembourg in 5 days. And Patton says, I'll have them there in 3. And we were there in 3. We had to move day and night to get there. And our troops went the battle then, and we went through Luxembourg, then into Germany, and then all the way through to Czechoslovakia. And the war ended in Czechoslovakia in May the 8th, 1945. And we was in Suice, Czechoslovakia. We met Russian soldiers at Czechoslovakia, and there was a line where the Germans on that side of the line would go to Russia, and on this side of the line they would come to the U.S. And so they wanted to all get over to our side for us to take them instead of going to Russia, but we couldn't let them because that line was, we knew where the line was and they couldn't go. These friends, I got one in Arkansas I hear from all the time, and one from Iowa that I hear from, and one from Kansas City. He's an old fella. He's now 96 years old. He was old whenever we went in. He was about 10 years older than me. And these friends, we just made friends, and we saw a lot of people in France especially that was glad that we were there, and they were happy that we were there. But as far as we were trained that this is a job we had to do, we were afraid. Everybody was afraid. That anybody says they wasn't afraid are not telling the truth, because they were. And because you never knew when there were shells coming in, or you never knew when you would go up to the front line to pick up somebody, and you'd get hit by a machine gun. One night there was chaplain with us, and there was 3 soldiers that was killed, and he wanted to go give them the last rites, and his Jeep driver wasn't there, so he come to me and wanted to know if I'd drive him up there and give these people the last rites. And I said, yeah, I'll take you. So I took him up there, and when we got up there, we was ahead of the troops, and we could hear the Germans just over the ridge talking. I mean, there wasn't anybody between these 3 men and the Germans. They'd killed these 3. And so we went up there and gave them the last rites, and we came back home. We didn't see the Germans, but we could hear them. We thought we'd win them. We thought we were better soldiers than the Germans, and we thought we had a job to do, and we were going to do it. And that's what our men did. I mean, a bunch of wonderful people that would go into this training for the number of years. Now, see, when I was over there, I didn't see Margaret in almost 2 years. From 1943 until 1945. I came back in October in 45. So I was missing her, and hoping she was missing me too. This first piece here, it was part of a parachute that the 82nd Airborne flew down in Normandy in 1944, in June the 6th. And it was hanging in a tree, and me and some other fellows cut it up to just keep, but we found it was good to wrap around us, especially when we was in the Battle of the Bulge, to keep us warm when we was at nighttime in a foxhole or something. This German flag I found on a city hall in Dillingen, Germany. And I happened to get it down, and nobody else wanted it, and so I brought it. This is a German Luger that I found in the field someplace. It's not a Luger, it's a Walther 32 caliber. This is a German helmet that was laying in the field, and I picked it up to bring it home as a souvenir. There was a warehouse full of these rabbit hats, and then there were some jackets. I got pictures of guys that had the jackets, and this rabbit fur was real warm. It was good. I didn't wear it over there, but I brought them home. And the kids done a lot of wearing after I got home.